with the, okay, so now the beginning of this is going to be weird. So it is recording, right? That's what happened with Laura Madeline's. I think that her presentation got stopped when everyone thought it was going, but um I just
And I do see that it is recording.
okay, thank you, Rich. Well, the beginning of this is going to be really interesting, huh? Today is the 3rd of October, and this is our Hospice Veteran Partnership Voices of Veterans panel discussion. And I just want to start by having our veterans in the room share their name, when they served, what branch they served in, and what their military occupation specialty was. So we can kind of have a general overview initially, if that's okay. I wish on the Zoom meeting there was a way to have like, maybe there is, and I don't know it, the six of you just up there and we could all be in the backgrounds, but I'm not sure how to do that. So, um, the the people that I have listed for the panel, and if there's another veteran in the room that is wants to be part of this panel and I don't say your name, would you please just let me know? The people I have listed here are Brooke and Clark, Joan, Lucas, Rich, and Russ. So let's go ahead and start with alphabetical order here. Brooke, can you start for us?
Yeah, sure. My name is Brooke Carter. I was in the Air Force from 2002 to 2013. I was a pilot flying various aircraft from trainers to close air support, attack aircraft to reconnaissance, planes to tours to Afghanistan. And I also worked with the Army as an air liaison officer for a couple of years.
Thank you, Brooke. And how about Dr. Clark Mickelson? Is he on the call here? Okay, there's so many people on the call. I'm not able to tell. Okay, I'll go to the next. Um, Dr. Joan Etzen? No, okay.
She's here.
Oh, she is here. Okay.
Yeah, I
I
saw
think
her.
Clark is as well.
They both
Yeah,
here.
they just need to come off of mute, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sonia.
Clark, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't see the mute. Yeah, Clark Mickelson, and I served 1976, 1978, U.S. Army and the Army Missile Lab, Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. However, I stayed on there as a civilian working Army for 37 years until I retired.
Oh, wow.
Oh, MOS was a physicist. They didn't know what to call me.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Joan, how do I say her last name? Eitzen?
Eitzen, yeah. Sorry, I was on mute before and I was having trouble getting off mute, but
That's okay.
I was in the Army from 1979 to 2006, and I was an Army nurse, and just served just about everywhere in the country, and in Japan, and I was a commander for a couple of places, and just had a great time, had a great experience. And I worked for the VA for a couple of years after I retired from the Army. So,
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that your perspective, not only as a veteran, but as a healthcare worker, you can really give us some good insight. Thank you for being here.
sure.
And Lucas?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm Lucas Randolph. I served 2005 to 2014. I was aircraft maintenance for heavy aircraft. And I don't, my claim to fame was I was in Turkey for 15 months. That was one of my best experiences. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Lucas. And Rich?
Hi, I'm Rich Lewis, and I served in the Army. It seems like there's a trend here. So I served from 1989 to 2011. And I started out as a chemical officer and finished out my last 12 years. I was an Army space and missile defense officer, and born and raised here in Colorado Springs and retired back here in Colorado Springs.
Thank you. And Russ, I know that you're here as you're muted, Russ. Y'all have to know that Russ is wonderful with people, but technology is not his favorite thing. I know his wife is right there helping him out.
Sometimes it takes a team.
Mm-hmm.
Unmute.
Yep, you're muted, so
Just saw it. Okay, now can you hear me?
yes, we can
Yeah.
hear you. Yay.
You know, I'm about as techie as my rose bush out here. I was in the service from June of 67 to June of 71. Went to engineering OCS at Fort Belvoir. Went to several schools and then ended up on Guam as a nuclear weapons officer in the 515th on Guam. Met my wife on December 23rd on a blind date, 1968. She was blind and I wasn't. And my big thing was because there were very few Army on the island of Guam. It was primarily Navy and Air Force. So because I was one of 3 officers, I had to do every third memorial service for those killed in Vietnam who were Guamanians, and they were killed more per capita than any state in the nation.
Thank you, Russ. Thanks for being here today. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah.
So I'm
Clark here, and I just want to say I was married to a veteran and,
oh,
who served in troop units, and I added to my perspective of laboratory service by far. And she didn't mind telling me she outranked me. So there we are.
she
Thank
didn't
you.
mind telling you what?
She didn't mind telling me that she outranked me. So there.
Oh. Well, if we were in the same room, this would be a little bit easier to kind of go down the row of how you're sitting. But I am curious if you all would just, you can do it popcorn style, our veterans here, but if you could just answer a question, what motivated you initially to join the military?
Clark speaking, and my dad and my uncles were all veterans, World War II, Korea, and I'm just a patriot at heart.
Hmm.
And it was Vietnam era anyway, so why not go ROTC when that time comes? And it turned out I didn't have to go there, but I was prepared anyway. Thank you.
And then you married a veteran, so it is.
All right.
Thanks, Clark.
And this is Rich, and similar to Clark, my grandfather was career Navy and Coast Guard. My dad was World War II, Korea, Vietnam veteran, and so it was very natural to kind of follow in their footsteps. Went into ROTC thinking I was going to be an Army doctor, and then realized I didn't want that much more schooling, so I went into the Army, and I just found that the ability to serve and make a difference in people's lives was unmatched in serving in the military. So I just kept doing it for 22 years.
Wow. Thank you, Rich.
My father, oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
My father was a veteran of World War II, and I primarily went to OCS so I wouldn't get drafted, and served a little less than 4 years, but meeting my wife made it all worth it.
You're quite fond of Irene. I've noticed that.
Yes.
I think continuing the trend here, my dad was in the Navy and my mom's dad was in the Army, so I think it somewhat normalizes it for certain families more than others. That and the propaganda of the time of Hollywood movies made me want to be a pilot in the military. So the Top Guns and Iron Eagles, that yeah, that got me.
Thanks, Brooke.
Well, this
I
is Joan.
joined. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Joan.
Okay. Yeah, I had all intentions of going to Vietnam as a nurse, and then by the time I got out of nursing school, it was over. But my father was a World War II veteran, and my brother went to West Point, and there had never been any women in the military. So I just joined for 3 years to serve my country, and gosh, the years just get away from you. And before I knew it, I mean, I was young, and then all of a sudden I got old, and it was 30 years later. And so, um, but every time I tried to get out, they'd offer me something, and they just did a real good job of keeping me in. So, and I also met my husband in the military. So we had a great time together. So I was really, really proud to be in the Army. Although I have to say, my mother didn't speak to me for 3 months after I joined the Army because she
Really?
she didn't think she didn't think women should be in the Army back then, which a lot of people thought at that time. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to serve my country for 3 years, and here I am.
Wow. Thank you, Joan. And I'd love to hear a little bit more if you don't mind sharing. You are representing the women and the women veterans. Sounds like who's married to Clark? Are you married to, you said you're married to a veteran too, but what was that like? What was community like as you entered in as a woman veteran or as a woman military service person?
I think it was a lot different in the medical field. We were really highly respected, and people waited for the nurses to come. So, I went to basic training, and I remember the MSCs waited for the nurses to come. And, we just, I mean, it was just such a good time. It was the camaraderie was so special. It was like nothing I had ever experienced.
Mm.
People taking care of each other and doing things together, and going to the field, just a lot of really good times, and I had no idea that it was such a good time, and that I would meet so many great people. I really didn't know what I was getting into. And I remember asking my recruiter, well, what if I don't like it? What if I really hate it and I want to get out? And he said, well, you can't. I said, well, what do you mean I can't? He says, well, you could get pregnant. And I wasn't married at that time. But at that time, you really had the choice. You didn't have to stay in if you were pregnant, and they wanted you to get out if you were pregnant. So I thought, well, okay, I guess worst comes to worst, and I really hate it. I'll figure it out. So, but overall, it was just such a positive experience. I know a lot of women have had bad experiences. When I was the program manager for women veterans, in Denver, the enlisted women were treated a lot different than the officers, and they had a lot more bad experiences and didn't get the respect, and a lot more, sexual issues that, we never had because we were officers. That's my experience anyway.
Thank you, Joan.
I joined, I mean, kind of similar to what Brooke said. It was very normalized in my family. My dad was enlisted for 4 years. My grandfather was drafted into Korea. Of course, there was like a mix of other factors. I wasn't going to be college bound, not a lot of opportunities. And, also that post 9/11 era, there was a lot of propaganda out there. There was a lot of, cool movies. I thought I was going to be a war hero. I joined maybe the wrong branch to be a war hero in the Air Force, but, I wanted to do my part during that era, whether it was misguided or not.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lucas. I'm curious if there's anything any of you want to share about kind of your beginning experience in the military, where you were deployed to, or what that was like. And you're under such different circumstances, which I appreciate. From a few, Russ, you're a Vietnam era. I feel like somebody else said they were Vietnam era or close to it. to the post 9/11. Just if anybody wants to just share what was your first deployment like, or yeah, just a little bit more about your military service.
I'll speak to that, Clark. I came in 76. Now, only because when I finished my undergraduate engineering degree, like somebody else said, Vietnam was dying down, and they said, we don't need all you second lieutenants. If you can find a grad school and pay your own way, we won't forget you. And they didn't, but we don't need you. So 6 years later, I went active duty. And at that time, the WAC Corps was disbanded and the women officers were all moved in with the rest of us. And frankly, they were treated awful.
Mm.
Even the officers, they were not wanted. And I met my wife as part of that. Now, our story, the Army split us, sent her to Germany and me to Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Well, what can I say? 4 bad marriages between us. We met again in late 2013 and finally got it right. And our military experience really was part of that because we both had the same background and the same coupling, if you will, of that experience, which made that marriage perfect until I lost her, well, frankly, to cancer and how I got introduced to hospice. But I am grateful for that service time because it helped meld us together. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark.
Yeah, that's powerful, Clark. So my story is a little bit um, you know, unique in that I came in, right at the beginning of 1990, and after I finished my schooling, my first duty assignment was into Germany, and right away, almost after I got to Germany, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and so as a chemical officer and working in a field artillery battalion, we were deployed right away down to Saudi Arabia. And so my first real experience in the Army was 6 months in, and I was in combat and in a full maneuver type of combat. So it was as a military professional, it was an incredible introduction to what it is to be in the military, and that I think that early experience really shaped my career for me because it showed me, golly, the importance of our training and what this profession is all about. And so although it was difficult being, just brand new into the military, it was incredibly impactful for me for the rest of my career.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, so I went into active duty in 2002, but I didn't finally deploy to Afghanistan until almost 2010. Um, and at that point, I definitely wanted to get out there as soon as I could. So it was a little frustrating for the being stuck in different training assignments, both in student role as an instructor role. Then went to Germany, more training before I finally got to go. I think this was more than probably a lot of people who signed up at the time. There was no draft. People wanted to be involved. People wanted to get down there. So by the time I got there, things were fairly established, and things did not seem like they were improving much. I mean, we've been there for almost a decade, and it just seemed like a complete mess. When I went back a few years later in another deployment, it seemed exactly the same, if not worse. So it was just like what are we doing here? Like that part of it just seemed meaningless, but the meaningful part came from what we're doing to help the guys on the ground. And I think that's where we pulled our meaning from, not in like helping America so much as helping the guys on the ground who are getting it really bad. So that's sort of what I took away from that.
Brooke, I really appreciate what you just said, and correct me if I say it incorrectly, but it sounds like what motivated you was the camaraderie that you had with the other people you're serving alongside and helping support them more so um, than the whole conflict. Or am I understanding what you said correctly?
Yeah, I think so. And it wasn't just a camaraderie with my direct unit, but also with people I haven't met.
Mhm.
Army, Marines, SEALs that are on the ground. Like there was definitely a mission. Like this is our mission is to get these guys home and
Mm.
help them get their mission done. I think we really gravitated around that. Um, Even if it's not like the person next to you, it's still more of a direct connection than an abstract. We're doing this for freedom or something like
A
that.
shared mission.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brooke.
I'm going to bring a little different twist. It somewhat aligns with Brooks. I was really what I consider now a blind patriot because I felt I should serve my country. And like Brooke, later I realized the only thing I was really worried about were the people I was serving with. Uh, and I didn't stay in because I never wanted to have to believe that I would have to send a nuclear weapon anywhere. We had tactical nukes, but nuclear weapons is something I hope we never have to use again. Um, so I got out for that reason. Like I finally decided our cause was not one that we should be a part of, that we should not have been in Vietnam. And for many years, I somewhat had a guilty conscience for even being in the service then. But Ken Burns' Vietnam documentary, 17 episodes, convinced me that I was not wrong and that I wasn't as ignorant as I thought I was, because most of us in country didn't even know really what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Russ.
I'll go. So I joined straight out of high school. The only job I had before the military was I worked at a concession stand during the summers. So it was a pretty big shift for me. Looking back, I thought I was a man at 18 years old, but I think, as probably most of us know, as a child, um, enlisted, no experience. All the guys around me, most of them between 18, 20 years old, and we are just a bunch of kids running their heads chopped off. I was in aircraft maintenance. If you know anything about aircraft maintenance, it's pretty grueling. So it's kind of like a meat grinder. It can be pretty intense. It can be pretty traumatic, honestly. The pacing is really fast. A lot of big personalities, and just again, as a kid, looking back, I was more. I don't know. I don't think in the moment it didn't phase me as much, but like years later, I think after that experience, because it was so formative on me as a young man, it's had quite a big impact.
Thank you so much, Lucas.
I just want to say thanks to Lucas because those guys ran the show for the flying world. Yeah, they were sleepless nights working around the clock to get things working, and they don't get half the credit they deserve. So thanks, Lucas.
Any of our other veterans want to share what their entry into service was like?
I have a question for Joan. Do you think things are better now and that they've improved a great deal since you were in and since you've been out?
No, I think they really haven't improved. You mean for women or
For women, period. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I actually do think for women it's improved. I think, I think they've lost some of the discipline in the military overall, which I don't think is a good thing. But I think overall for women, there's a lot more opportunities. I mean, talking to somebody who was in the first class of women at West Point. Well, I would love to have gone to West Point, but I just didn't have that opportunity because women couldn't do it. So now I think there's a lot more opportunities for women. So I do think that in that sense, it's improved a lot.
Thank you, Joan.
Hmm.
So we have quite a variance of length of time served among the six of you. And I'm curious, when you got out, what was your transition to civilian life like after leaving the military?
Well, I'll start. I got out in 71, and a lot of Vietnam vets who returned to the United States were not treated well at all, and many of you know that. I was not one of those. I had no issues that way. I was kind of, though, like a ship without a rudder. I thought I wanted to be a forest ranger, and because of the rift reduction in force, there were about 400 people applying for each position to be a forest ranger, so I obviously didn't get that. And so I kind of struggled for 2 years as to where I should end up in what kind of occupation. Ended up 41 and a half years with Safeway, which is not what I would have chosen to begin with, but it turned out to be quite good.
Thanks, Russ.
Well, Clark speaking, and the hardest part for me is what to wear. It was so simple. Put on the uniform and here we go. And, and I didn't know what to wear. But I always stayed close to the military. A couple of years with the rocket company, and before I was able to go back as a civilian to the Army Missile Lab, and would not have wanted to work anywhere else.
Mm.
And I think many of us, among our attributes, is we have purpose.
Mm.
And well, that old word discipline, but dedicated to what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it became more and more difficult in the Army as bureaucracy grew. But we worked hard at it. We worked damned hard at it, and that fit our background. And the training we had is first military and continued on, and that's it hasn't gone away today.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go away. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will add one thing I left out. I was so intent in getting out that I didn't think of this, but I was going to become a minister, and my wife said, well, I won't be married to you any longer because I cannot be married to a minister and have to wear long dresses and follow all of these strict rules. However, what I would have done had I thought of it deeply is I would have gone to chaplain school and become a chaplain, because I felt they were serving those of all faiths, didn't matter what your faith was. And I think that would have been a very rewarding career. But by the time I thought I should do that, it was way too late to go back and do it.
Thanks, Russ.
So
Going
this
back,
is, oh, go ahead.
just gonna touch on purpose one more time. I think being in the military, you have a very distinct purpose. It's obvious and it's powerful. Getting out for me, it was like trying to find another purpose, which was a little difficult. I went to grad school for a while, then worked in the corporate world, and then like you try to twist what the company's mission is to tell yourself that it's meaningful.
Mm.
But it's always kind of contrived. But I think like most, I don't know, I think a lot of vets like have that sense of purpose and maybe struggle to find some of that outside of the military. It sounds like some people can find that pretty easily. But for others, that might be a little bit of a struggle. So we bounce around to try to find something.
Thanks, Brooke.
Yeah, so my transition, very similar, I think, to a lot of veterans, is that, I retired and I actually went in and started working as a government contractor, doing very similar types of work that I had done on active duty. And I enjoyed it because it was familiar, but there was something missing. And like I said, about what I enjoyed most about my service was the relationships and the connections with people. And as a contractor, didn't really have that kind of feeling. Then I met my wife, Pam, in 2016, and I saw, what she was doing. She was helping people navigate through Medicare and understanding, how Medicare worked. And I shared with her the challenges that I saw my parents have with Medicare. And she challenged me. She said, "Well, Rich, why don't you join me and help the veteran community figure this all
Mm.
out?" And I felt like, wow, that's a neat calling. And so we started, an agency called Medicare Mentors, and we serve everybody who has Medicare, but really we focus a lot on the veteran community, helping them understand. And what I what I now see is the joy of my life is the long-term relationship with people. And so while I was doing okay as a government contractor, kind of like what Brooke was sharing, the purpose was somewhat missing. Now I have a purpose, and I get up in the morning and I'm thinking, boy, how can I do this even better? So I think when we as veterans or we as people find that purpose in life, that's when your energy and your joy really comes back to you.
Thank you, Rich. Purpose and relationship seems like a theme here.
I think it's probably like a two-part answer for me. I was, when I got out, I was lucky enough slash unlucky enough to have a pretty significant injury. And so I was medically retired. And so
Okay.
from day one, I had benefits. Um, and so that provided a foundation for me to go out into the real world, if you will. But I think if I were to speak more broadly from an enlisted perspective, it, I think we make up 80% of the military force. I think a little bit more than that. And I think for us, our transition to the civilian life is maybe a little bit different. There's a lot of challenges. Like I said, we're just kids. We have a concession stand. That's all I knew. And that's kind of the theme for a lot of the guys I served with. Now, because of social media, I get to see how a lot of my people I served with are doing, and most aren't doing very well.
Mm.
Even if I take where I work, for example, I work at a very veteran forward-thinking company. I think 30% of our workforce are veterans, but I think only 1 in 10 of them are enlisted. So if you think about that disparity, I think there's a misconception about maybe how we're serving our veterans, because there's a large percentage who aren't benefiting from aren't benefiting from having served, I guess is what I would say.
Do you have any more to say about that? That feels really important.
Oh man, I have so much to say. But I'm trying to hold back the emotion a little bit. I have a lot to say about it. It Again, speaking from an enlisted perspective, it seems like often our voices are the smallest. And I think a lot of people who maybe interact with veterans have, you know, my so and so was a retired colonel. A retired colonel is much different than Private Snuffy, who did 4 years as a child, is traumatized and is now living in the real world. And I think often people will approach, let's say, Private Snuffy as if maybe his experience is closer to what they have in their mind. And often it could be anything but that.
And Lucas, I just appreciate the work that you're doing, listening to veterans and getting their stories out. Can you share a little bit about that? Because what you're just sharing now is, I just think really important and impactful for us as people who want to serve and come along veterans.
Yeah, I'd love to. You don't have to talk me into talking about writing. Yeah, so I interview veterans. So I have two components where I write essays, nonfiction and fiction, and it's about veteran experiences. Um, and then I have another component where I volunteer with hospice, and we write what we call legacy stories for the veterans. And often, I try not to write biographies or like a linear story. I try to capture, impacts and then how that experience is, I'll try to follow down the road, how maybe an experience in the military has now affected them as a father, or has, impacted them as a husband. Um, yeah.
That flows really perfectly into what my next question here was, and that's how has your service informed your current life, your now? And that kind of is part of how it's informed yours, it sounds like.
I want to comment on what Lucas said. I think he is very right that listed frequently are not listened to as other officers. And part of the reason I got out was I had people with master's degrees in my nuclear weapons unit on Guam, and many of them were more educated than I was, and I felt had a great deal more intelligence, but they were enlisted because they'd been drafted. And I had a difficult time feeling I was any better than any of them because I wore bars and they wore stripes. And so part of the reason I got out was I just never had an attitude that probably fit an officer well. I could have had that if I'd been a chaplain, but didn't.
Thank you, Russ.
And one more thing to add to that, I mean, it may be obvious, but for this panel, Lucas mentioned that like 80% of veterans are enlisted. So this panel skews heavy to the officer side, I believe. So just a caveat when you're hearing these stories, like obviously every veteran story is different, but realize the way this may be biased or skewed.
Thank you, Brooke. Does anyone have anything to share around how their service has impacted their current life, the present?
This is Joan. I've been sitting here thinking about what is like one of the things that has really impacted me the most. And before I got out, I was the chief nurse at Walter Reed, and I would meet the buses from Andrews, where the flights would come in with all the injured soldiers, and it just would break your heart to see them coming off the buses, and first of all, seeing them on the plane with IVs everywhere and on ventilators, and just really sad. So I didn't go to the planes that often, but I did go to the buses. I did meet the buses because the buses came right to Walter Reed, and just to watch them carried off the buses with these just horrific injuries. I still, in my mind, I see it like it was yesterday. And, I retired in 2006, so they've been retired almost 20 years, but it seems like yesterday and I don't know that people really, unless you've been there, you can't imagine how bad it was, they got no legs, no arms. The worst was when they lost their eyes. I mean, you can pretty much get some new legs. I'm not minimizing that, but when you lose your eyes, I don't know how somebody recovers from that. So it was really, and then I'd have to go visit patients a lot, and just to see them in beds and in the ICUs and just think, how do you recover from something like that? You give your life to the military, you serve your country, and I don't know that you really expected it to be that bad, and so I think about that. It wasn't that hard for me to adjust, other than, I lived on 4 hours of sleep for many, many years. We as active duty, you worked all the time as a nurse. I mean, there was no such thing as an 8 hour shift, and you didn't get breaks and you didn't get lunch. And I remember when I did get out and I did get a job as a nurse, I thought, gosh, I don't know what it's like to work 8 hour shift. People would say, you should go home. It's time to leave. I don't know. I still have stuff to do. And so I think that was one of my hardest adjustments, was just trying to get away from that sense of duty and just have a normal life, have some balance in your life. And then on the other hand, I think, well, what is my meaning in life now? And I've struggled with that a lot, because I knew what my meaning was when I was in the Army. And you just kind of wonder, well, I don't know. I just struggle with that still to this day.
Thank you, Joan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Clark, I retired civil service 2015, and so it's 10 years, but sadly my wife came down with ovarian cancer, and so I spent 5 years becoming the total caretaker. And but that comes with that same purpose and dedication.
Mm.
And at least to my opinion, a good officer watches out for those under him. And that was true not only active military, but civil service as well, because I can't do anything without them. And same for defense contractors, by the way. I work with many. And yeah, a bunch of them just out for the money, but there are those who were really dedicated, and we're still friends. We're still good friends. And one in particular lost his wife to cancer. He calls me every month.
Mm.
How am I doing? Because what's purpose now that she's gone? And I don't know what that purpose is exactly, except that I find a lot of older people need someone to listen.
Mhm.
And part of the reason I volunteered to be, volunteer for hospice is I can do that.
Mm.
I can do that. I don't have to give advice. A lot of people just need someone to hear. And that's a purpose any of us can do.
Mm.
And I play cards at the local senior center, and it's amazing how many people want to trap me afterwards. Can I tell you something?
Mm.
It's amazing. And we can do that. That's what I like. We know how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark. Who's lucky enough to have you as a volunteer? Are you with what
Denver Hospice.
Denver Hospice?
Yeah, Sue is waving her arms.
Well, I love what you shared about caring for your wife and that giving you purpose too. And just want to honor that. I'm sorry for your loss, and I
Well,
think it's beautiful that
Denver Hospice did for her
Mm.
and us.
Thank you so much. Well, we're talking to the choir a little bit, but those veteran volunteers, that's who's representing here. Our veterans are our veteran volunteers of hospice and palliative care organizations. There's just such a unique connection and invitation when one veteran meets another veteran, and it's beautiful to watch. My father's a veteran, and gosh, I used to hate it when I was younger, and I was like, can we ever leave Home Depot? Because he'd run into somebody and talk forever. But what a gift to give our patients out in the world exactly what you just said, that the gift of being present and listening. So thank you for that. I am curious because, we are listening. That's our hope anyways, as a hospice veteran partnership group, is that we will be listeners like you just described. So this question is there anything that you would like to say that doesn't get asked, that you wish people would ask because, you know, it's something you want people to know about military service or its impact or your point of view? And a little bit of what Lucas said touches that for me. The way that enlisted persons maybe don't get as much space in the room or voice as non-enlisted. And to be more cognizant of that, for me, that was helpful to learn, Lucas. So for all of you, is there anything you'd like to share that hasn't been asked, but we'd love to listen?
I'll go. So, one thing that I struggled with when I when I was on active duty and afterwards was, people thanking me for my service and not really knowing what to say. And I had a friend who shared with me and said, just respond, well, you're worth it.
Mm.
And that our service, well, yeah, of course, we're serving our country. We're serving our fellow, Americans, our fellow human beings, kind of like what Brooke talked about. We're supporting our fellow servicemen and women, and it's that camaraderie. So telling people that they were worth the time and the effort and the sacrifice that that service took from us or others. And I think also the I've noticed that there sometimes in the veteran community there is a division of what we talked about, enlisted and officer, but also a division in, oh well, I was a combat veteran. Well, I didn't go to combat. And I really think that's very unhealthy. Because everybody who served, everybody who raised the right hand and entered into military service did that not knowing and not controlling how that service was going to play out. But they were all willing to step in and step up and serve. And so honoring and recognizing and uh, appreciating that service, regardless of the way that service looked, is really important. And trying hard not to uh, bring about some sort of a judgment of what that service was, because everybody who served and made a great contribution. And that's where I think we should really focus on, not what you ended up doing while you were in the service.
Mhm. Thank
Uh,
you.
Rich brought up a great point too, because I go Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever, get my discount, say thank you for your service, and I always want to ask why. Do you know your history? Do you know the history of your father, your grandfather, your grandfathers? What did they do? When did they serve? Because they probably did. And don't just give me the hollow, yeah, I've got to say this. I mean, I appreciate it anyway. It's far better than when Vietnam ended, but I do have to think why. And I appreciate what you said, Rich, to tell them you were worth it. I shall remember that. Thank you.
I think sort of along those lines, it's important not to just make assumptions of what somebody's experience was like. Something like, oh, you were over XYZ during this time. It must have been horrific. You must have seen horrific things, or it must have been so difficult. This must have been so difficult. That must have been so bad. When maybe that person was like, oh, I didn't really see horrific things, but I suffered in these other ways. So just not making assumptions as to one's experience, but just having a conversation. Um, I think is always a generally safe way to go, and then feel out how willing that person is to talk about that, and yeah, go let the conversation go where it goes.
Thank you, Brooke. Mm.
I'll piggyback on kind of what Brooke said, not making assumptions. I think a lot of service members are suffering one way and certain aspects. And I think it's important not to assume, oh, this person's in pain mentally, physically, morally, because of maybe an action they did, and realize that, I mean, for example, I've seen guys that were just relentlessly bullied,
Mm.
from again, a child, and they think they're doing something good for their country. And yeah, maybe they're a little awkward. And, because they have that difference, they're dragged through the mud for 4 years straight. And so I would say their trauma may be significantly different than, someone who went to Afghanistan. This person may have just never even left Texas. But they're hurting and they probably
Mm.
don't even know why, or may not know why. So I think there's a lot of social layers like that. Again, a lot of moral injuries
Mm.
that a lot of people wouldn't even attribute to a military experience.
Thank you, Lucas.
Becky knows who this person is. I'm not going to mention his name, but I think Clark said listening. And one of the most important things we can do is listen to a person's story. And this person probably has the worst case of PTSD, at least of anybody that I know. He served in Vietnam in villages. And I've heard his story since we've lived here in Longmont, known him for 8.5 years. I've heard it. I can't even count the number of times, but I simply continue to listen because in some ways, maybe listening to his story again is helping him deal with a horribly, horribly painful experience.
Yeah.
Thank you, Russ. A few of you touched on this in light of, November's Veterans Day, which I imagine people have mixed feelings around, is what I've heard from other veterans. Because really we should be attentive to veterans in our midst all year round. And I know Russ and I have talked before about kind of that mixed of celebrating and being thanked and honoring people's story and their service. Um, so this question is kind of twofolded. If I see a veteran, he's wearing, he or she is wearing a hat, somehow I know they're a veteran. What is a good way to acknowledge um, a veteran in my midst? Thank you for my service. I use that frequently, and then I hit a speed bump because I had somebody who was wearing a Vietnam veteran hat say, "You wouldn't thank me if you knew what I did." And I said, I want to honor the fact that you served. And I'm sorry that if the way I said that came out. And and he said, well, if you want to listen, it was at a Habitat for Humanity project. If you want to listen, then I have a few more things I could share. There was a little bit of space there. And so I was able to. But in passing, sometimes I might be walking on a trail and see somebody, or I might see a patient just for a short moment and learn that they served. I'm curious, what is a good phrase that can help a veteran feel seen, and not judged, and that honors their service and recognizes it, but doesn't make assumptions. So I think all of us on the Hospice Veteran Partnership are curious to do this well, to see the veterans in our midst and to hold their stories as they're willing to share them. So if you could speak to that, that would be wonderful.
Clark, I usually say, hey, I like your hat. That always starts,
Hmm.
and it just seems to evolve from there. And it might be, well, what unit were you in exactly? And they just, out it comes.
Hmm.
Doesn't really take much.
No, and I think having fun with people is always
Yeah.
wonderful. People get all kind of wrapped up. Oh, what should I say? How should I say it? I love seeing an Air Force guy and saying, "Hey, go Army, beat Air Force," and you know, just having fun, and because people are wearing their hat, wearing a shirt, wearing something because they're proud or they want others to know what they have done. So if you recognize that and say, hey, like Clark said, I like your hat, or what did you do in the Air Force? That having the conversation, because sometimes thank you for your service. It almost seems like kind of a trite kind of thing, but we're human beings. We all want connection. We all want relationship. So when somebody asks, "Hey, I see you were in the Air Force. What did you do?" Then that's a step beyond just saying hello, which is kind of the thank you for your service. But that's also appropriate, and I think wonderful too.
Thanks, Rich. Joan, do you have anything as our female veteran representative here?
Yeah, I actually was thinking that I still have people that say, "Oh, what did your husband do in the military? And what's your husband's social security number?" And then I have to tell them, "Well, I was in the military." And so they kind of take for granted still in this day and age that, it was the male that was in the military, and they are pretty taken aback when I say, "Oh," and then they'll ask me, "What did I do?" And then, when my feeling was when I say I'm a nurse, it's not quite as, um, I don't want to say respected, but, if you weren't combat, then you weren't quite as important. Even though we would tell them, you can't live without us,
Very true.
but we'd have to tell them that, so that's just, and even at the VA, it was like that when I worked at the VA. If you worked at the VA and you weren't a veteran, you still assumed that the veterans were the men, and you were treated differently. So that's just been my personal experience.
Yeah, Clark, and I want to ask Joan if female officers are treated better than they were, because they were treated awful when I served. My wife, for example, a mathematician, and if they needed somebody to run the concession stand, they always picked her. Or it's Christmas and everybody's off. Well, it was always her who had to be on duty, and it was awful. What a waste! What a waste! I really hate waste. See people waste. I hope it's got.
Yeah, it was never bad for nurses. I'm sure it was bad for other officers, But, if you didn't have kids, then we got stuck working all the holidays because, people so we were kind of discriminated against if you were single or didn't have kids in that way. But I think in my heart of hearts, I believe it's gotten better. I at least hope so.
I hope so. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
I have one anecdote that might seem like it is trending that way. So my name is Brooke. It's with the E. It's yeah, everyone thinks it's a girl's name. Often when I'm at Home Depot, I show them my ID card to get the discount because like that's probably the best part of being a vet is the Home Depot discount. Um, and more than once they've said, "Oh, thank Brooke for her service," thinking that I'm plugging in with my wife's account or something. So maybe things are getting better. Who knows?
Hey, you get a discount at Lowe's too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, you do.
I think Lowe's had
Yes.
it first, actually.
Well, I I'm curious if there's anybody from the panel here. I've been asking all the questions and I still have more. I would enjoy taking each of you out to coffee and just sitting with you for another hour. I mean, just thank you for all the time you've already given us and sharing a bit of your story. Anybody else on the panel, since I've been hogging all the questions, want to ask our panelists anything before I move on to anything else? Well,
Becky, I think a cool question that I would like to know from the other panelists is, uh, what has been their experience with hospice as a veteran? Because I think all of us have had some sort of engagement with hospice. I would love to hear other people's the veterans' experience with hospice.
thank you, Rich.
I was with my father on April 15th, 2015, when he died. I was beside him in home I was raised in Buena Vista. And he died at 1:30 in the morning. And I think I knew a lot about hospice already, but first thing we did was call hospice. And I can't even remember who showed up now, but my admiration and respect for them grew by leaps and bounds, because I didn't know as much as I certainly do now, but was quite amazing. And I know that all of you feel the same way.
Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, Clark, my wife suffered ovarian cancer for 5 years. And near the end, when they said there was nothing more they could do, the oncologists, fortunately, someone said, call hospice now. Don't wait. Call them in now and get everything set up. And I'm so glad we did. So glad. It wasn't just the nurses, but the social worker, the chaplain, so helpful. And particularly at the end when I just couldn't care for her anymore. To go to the Denver Hospice ICU was just a blessing.
Thank you.
And even afterwards, I wanted to tell Sue I was at the candlelight memorial service. It took me 3 days to get over that. I say get over it, to recover, if you will. And my sister-in-law was with me, and she was the same way. Oh, what a powerful experience. So grateful.
Thank you, Clark.
I'd like to talk about my experience a little bit, volunteering in hospice. So I think as veterans, we can naturally be somewhat defensive. I don't know if we get more defensive with age. Maybe someone else can attest to that. But a lot of the veterans, when I walk in and I'm like, hey, I'm a veteran, you want to talk? They want to talk. But then when I say, I'm a writer and I'd love, if you'd like to maybe write some things down with me, we can work out some stories for your family, that it often shifts. I think, I find that many are worried that their words are going to be twisted or used in a way. And I always have to reassure them that everything we write together. I'll read everything to you, we'll go through this together. But I find in the end that once the experience is done, even if they've been kind of apprehensive, and not only is it restorative for them, but it's very rewarding. They feel like they've accomplished something. And just as an example, so these are just for the families, but we write books and they can't see it. And we actually we publish them. And so
awesome.
At the end of our time together, I have a physical product that I give them, and I'll read it. We'll read it together. And I think it's validating. That's the experience I get from them once it's over. Even if there's some trials and tribulations along the way, I can just see how much it helps. How I don't even have words for it. Maybe it's as rewarding for me, maybe as it is for them. And it's also restorative and healing for me as well. But I guess that's been sort of my experience. It's kind of this back and forth. It's a relationship that I have to nurture and develop with them. Um, you know,
Lucas, who's lucky enough to have you as a volunteer? That's incredible what you're
Yeah,
doing.
thank you so much. I volunteer with Ovation Hospice.
Mhm.
And my books are open though, so if anyone's interested in legacy stories, hit me up and we can talk about it.
Talk about purpose. What a beautiful purpose
Thanks.
that is. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd really like
Did you put
to
your
expand it. I'd love more people to do it.
did you put
I'd
your
love to bring in more writers. Um, I think not enough voices and stories are being told out there. I mean, not just veterans. Everyone in hospice could benefit
Mm.
from this.
Mhm.
So yeah,
I think
appreciate
Clark's
it.
asking for your contact
yeah,
information in
put in
the
the chat or something?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. Thanks.
Oh, please, thank you.
Well, this is in addition to what Lucas just said. I don't know how many years now, but I've been calling widowers. I stay in touch with them for years. And the reason I do is I think as widowers, in most cases at least, they have a more difficult time when they lose their spouse than women do. That doesn't mean women don't suffer after they lose a spouse, but uh, like Lucas, he listens to stories. I do as well. I call them and just let them know I care. And they feel free to share whatever they may be going through at the time. So I think that can be valuable for anybody and everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Russ.
I think hospice has come a long way with the attention they pay to veterans because when I first started volunteering at hospice almost 20 years ago, they really didn't do anything for veterans. They didn't, not that I know of. I mean, I was doing home care at the time, but I don't remember um, there ever being a veteran liaison. And now there's so much attention given, the fact that somebody gets a certificate, saying they were in the military and they have activities for veterans and they go to the nursing homes now and have meetings with the veterans, not just the nursing homes, but the assisted living places and they have a chance for all the veterans to get together and for somebody to lead those groups. And I think it really means a lot
Mm.
to them. So I think they've come a long, I think that they've come a long way with taking care of veterans, and it just makes me feel good.
Thank you.
My experience has been kind of on the receiving end of hospice with, first my mom, and she was one of those unusual cases where she had a fall, had a traumatic brain injury, was expected to pass, and was put into hospice. And a couple of years later, she was still hanging in there and graduated from hospice. And then surprisingly, my dad was diagnosed with bone cancer and was given a month to live, and he was right away put into hospice. And I just saw the incredible support that flowed in to support me and my brother and my sister as we were trying to understand what was going on, and their advocacy of helping us communicate effectively to the caregivers that were surrounding my dad, and doing the pain management and all of those kinds of things that was so critical for my dad to be able to pass in peace was incredible. And then, as it happens, dad passed away, and then shortly after, mom started to take another turn downward, and again, hospice entered right in and supported us through that. So I was just blown away with the education and the support that hospice provides. And so now, anytime somebody talks about the fact that they have a spouse or a father or somebody who is going through a hospice, uh, I just in a way, I feel good because I know that they're surrounded by some really great supportive people that uh, dedicate their lives to serving people who are in a really hard place. And the fact that people in hospice are willing to go into those hard places, I think is a lot very similar to the veteran community where we've, volunteered to go into these very hard places. You do that in a very intimate way, and I want to thank all of you for the great work that you do because it's so important.
So I did notice what happened, Rich. You turned it around and you're filling our buckets here as we're hospice and palliative care workers out in the world. And thank you for those kind words, all of you, about the work of hospice. It is important work. My last question is, you're the voices we have today. Is there anything that you feel you should share that would help us better care for veterans who are on our service that we should consider as we support them?
So this might not be the right audience, but I know that there's a lot of healthcare workers in the room. This is more directed at maybe younger vets who are still working. And my, I guess, suggestion would be to not overdiagnose. So one thing I've seen with a lot of vets coming back who are trying to get work is they get into the healthcare system that doesn't understand veterans or the types of jobs that they might be trying to seek. And they hand out diagnoses that, I mean, obviously give people the treatment they need, diagnose real things. But a lot of jobs that veterans would be looking at would require security clearances or for the federal government, which are very strict on things regarding head injuries, mental illness, anything neurological. And I think things like mental illness and drugs for mental illness are normalized so much, yet certain aspects of, I guess, employment for veterans, say, I just know the FAA, for example, that's a huge red flag, or security clearances, there may be issues. Tell the veteran, hey, if I give you this medicine, you're going to have diagnosis of this, and let them sort of understand what the implications are, because things like that can really derail a veteran's prospects for work. I know this is hospice, so maybe not the right audience, but yeah, something for
Hospice,
the
palliative
healthcare
care,
community.
and VA professionals on here. So yeah, it's very applicable. And that's helpful to know. We had someone share from the vet center, and she mentioned something about that when you go to the vet center, you don't necessarily have to have that put into your record. And so that's a helpful thing for veterans who may be needing some mental health support, but not wanting to be limited in their career by that support. That makes sense.
You know, from my profession now, helping people with Medicare, we run into clients all the time who are the spouses of a veteran who has passed away due to a service-connected condition. And they don't know that that makes them eligible for a program called CHAMP VA. And so they are in turn missing out on some amazing benefits that are available to them because they just don't understand all of that. And it seems to be pretty common that the veteran, whether it's male or female, it seems like the veteran in the couple are typically the ones who are taking care of a lot of the the logistics in the family. And when that veteran passes, the surviving spouse a lot of times is, not only grieving but also struggling with trying to learn everything that they didn't have to necessarily do. So a story. I have a close friend here in Pueblo, and her husband was actually killed in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot. And she did not realize that she had TRICARE. She had gone she's in her 70s now. She had gone her whole life not realizing that she had these medical benefits until we sat down and started to try and work through things with her. So I think, that understanding that that veteran need is very unique to that veteran community and different than the civilian world. So I think having some sort of support like that for the surviving spouse is really important.
Thank you, Rich.
So my wife is actually sitting off to the side here, and she's like, tell them about this in response to this question. She also served in the military, um, and she works in healthcare, and she also volunteers with veteran community groups. And she's reminding me how important connection is, and saying that if you just bring two veterans together who may not know each other, wherever you're at, or a group of them together, that the fireworks that can ensue from that, is pretty amazing. Even if they're generations apart or, different branches, I think every veteran from every walk is able to relate and connect with another veteran in a way that maybe a civilian cannot. So I would just say look for opportunities to create those play dates, or whatever it is, because yeah, they're pretty special.
I just can't thank you all enough for your time today, and just so grateful for the six of you that are giving your time to volunteer for hospice and palliative care organizations, and that honestly and vulnerably shared with us today. I think that we're all better for it. Feel like I need to go for a walk and just process some of all that was said, and just know how grateful we are. Um, we just, and anybody else have some moments of thanks here as we wrap up?
Clark, just one hospice can help with that too, to know if you're a veteran or your veteran is dying, that they can be buried at Fort Logan, for example. My wife is there.
Mm.
I'm so glad to have found that out. And I didn't, just by accident, I learned that. And so it is possible. And the spouse with them, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you, Clark. Anything, Laura Madeline or Stephanie, as VA representatives here?
No, this was really valuable to have this forum. I appreciate it. And you did a great job leading this, Becky.
Well, I'm hoping to go for Oprah's job because she's going to be retiring soon. So, Well, thank you all. My day is going to be better because of this last hour and a half. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Blessings to all.